Hello, my friends. This is Lynda Lippin, and welcome to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Well, hello, everybody. It's Lynda Lippin, your host. Welcome once again to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Today, I have Gwen Miller with me again for the second time. Gwen is an accomplished Pilates teacher and colleague and just an all-around good person. Her book, Safe Movement for All Spines, is coming out later this month, I believe. Yes, it is. She's nodding at me as I speak. You guys can't see the video, but I can. Gwen actually started her own fitness journey when she had gained a lot of weight. She also has her own spine pathologies, her own body issues, and has been able to work through them for herself. She is a Balanced Body Master Trainer. She is just a brilliant and wonderful person, and I am extraordinarily excited to have her here with me today. Now, last time, hi, Gwen.
Hi, Lynda. Thank you. And yes, the book is coming out May 8th. It's going to be shipping. So it's available for pre-order right now. So
fabulous. And of course, there will be a link to order the book in the show notes. And I will actually be doing, thank you so much for the advanced copy. And I will be doing a review of the book. And I want you to know that not only is the book really like an ultimate resource, I think, in dealing with clients with all kinds of back pathologies, whether you are coming at it from a Pilates angle, a yoga angle, or a personal fitness training angle. But there is also a lot in the book about the language of healing, the language of inclusion, and really how we speak to ourselves and to our clients. And this is a topic that we don't really talk about so much in Pilates teacher training programs. Right? I mean, you're a Balanced Body Master Trainer. Is there a lot of, I mean, you may do it in the same way that I always do it when I'm dealing with apprentices and trainees, but, you know, language other than cueing.
Right. Well, I actually started becoming aware of the importance of language choices during my yoga teacher training, and that was, 2 decades ago. And it was called inclusive cueing, and part of it's kind of rings a little bit strange for some people, but part of it was to be using we, us, our instead of you, yours, and including people in the movement, including students in the movement cueing as if we were all in it together. And over the years, I've really kind of expanded on that idea. And in the book, there's actually sections of different types of language choices that I feel like need to be addressed differently in our studio environments and in teacher training programs, just to make people aware of their own language choices. And I've even been called out by my students when I did a negative self-talk about myself. And I realized, we are leading by example, and we are leading by teaching. And so I believe that the communication piece is extremely important, because the communication itself can set up an environment where there is an optimal opportunity for learning, where students feel safe to ask questions or to express that they may be feeling something that might be a question for them, as far as whether it's actually good for their body. And language choices can also kind of close the door to that communication. So I'm really happy that you're, as interested in this as I am, and that we've actually were talking before the show about how do you include the language choices? How do you do that in a group? Like, how do you cue in a group? And one of the big keys in a group, I believe, is that our language, the way that people learn, we all know that there's three different styles of learning. There's the physical learners, there's the visual learners, and then there's the auditory. And most people are not auditory learners. Most people, and especially in our profession, are more the kinesthetic or physical. We need to feel it. And then secondarily, we need to see it. And so our words are actually, we need to fine tune our cueing to be able to accurately describe what something feels like, but then we're describing what it feels like to us. And it's not always the same for our client. So when we're cueing someone, and, I think that back and forth repartee between a client and a teacher is very important. When we're teaching a group, my personal opinion, and other people may have other opinions, but if it is not a question of safety or injury that's imminent, I do not call out an individual in a group. I will cue the entire group for the thing that I see. And something like, let's place our hands on our pelvis and in single leg circles, for example, and just feel whether you are rocking and rolling quite a bit or whether you're really able to use your abdominals to control that movement, and perhaps take a smaller circle would be an example of not calling out one person in a group. And it's kind of an art. But the other thing I really want to speak to is that there's kind of a train of thought in teaching that if the person doesn't understand our cue, perhaps it's their fault. And I will always step back from saying a cue, and most of the class will likely do what I meant, but some of them will do literally what I said. And those individuals that are not doing the movement that I intended, I figure, well, that's a learning opportunity for me as an instructor. I take responsibility for that. I have not communicated my instructions in a way that that student can understand, interpret, and execute. So it's my responsibility as a teacher to take that personal responsibility for making sure that the communication is clear and clearly said in the way my student needs to hear it.
Yes, I agree. I also think that it's so important that teachers remember that we need to do continuing education. We need to surround ourselves, and especially if you're a newer teacher, especially if you have been thrown into a group situation. Because let's face it, I mean, Exponential Fitness is like one of the fastest growing franchises in the world. Okay. They're in Korea, they're in Japan, they're all over the United States, they're all over Europe. They are everywhere. And so they're on cruise ships now. We are looking at kind of music driven 12-person reformer classes with maybe some springboard or some MVE chair or some Bozu or some TRX thrown in, for fun and flavor. And while it is somewhat affordable, right, or more affordable than, say, taking a private, I feel like since this has happened, right, we don't have no control over it, and it will continue to grow and happen, that people like us need to be there to help support these new teachers. And I feel like one thing that your book does extraordinarily well, and that I feel like I do well too, is breaking down an exercise into really the salient points. So, one complaint I hear all the time from teachers, and I hear it in my group, I see it in other Facebook teacher groups, is why can't people keep their heels together when they're doing pull straps? Now,
Right.
for me, the heels together is the least thing you want to worry about in that exercise. I want to
Yeah.
know, are their abs in? Are their hips stable? Are they able to pull the straps without cranking it out of their lower backs? Are they able to move their shoulder blades? Are they, there's a lot we can discuss in that exercise. And then, the next thing that I'll see is, so I've got this heavy person in my class who doesn't like being on their stomach on the box. And, my brain just goes, so flip the relationship to gravity and have them sit on the box and do the same
Right.
movement.
Exactly. That's
Have them
exactly
stand
right.
up and get some hand weights. Like, there's no need to call anybody out in this. You can do the whole class flow, and you can literally say, number one, if you're not that comfortable being on the box with your boobs on the box, shift your weight a little forward, let your boobs go off the box. It's okay.
Right.
Still
Right.
not that comfortable? Sit up on the box, put your feet in the headrest and grab the straps, and we could do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, Lynda, we are of like mind in so much of this. And I think it's a beautiful thing that there's, that we're here to, help teachers and help each other. I'm a big believer in continuing ed. I'm constantly doing continuing ed and encourage that. It's if you don't do continuing ed, so many of us are in one person shops, and all we hear is our own voice talking to our client, or our classes. And I think it's important to have other viewpoints and to keep our minds fresh. I mean, it's part of what really drives the joy I feel in doing what we do. It helps our own growth. And what you're speaking to about these kind of first of all, is this environment where we have the music driven and 12-person reformer classes. And I know there are other brands that do that. You're mentioning one brand, and I actually wrote it down because I haven't heard of that one yet, but I've heard of a bunch of other ones. And every time they move into an area, the Pilates instructors, Pilates studios, everyone's like, oh no, because their pricing is low and they're kind of seen as not as good of quality. And my question is that really Pilates, or is that Pilates derived movement that's being done on apparatus that is inspired by Pilates? I don't know the answer to that. I have not personally experienced this, but I do know that what I hear is that because of the size of the groups and because of the frequency of classes on the schedule, there's a need for instructors to be trained. And I'm seeing this in my own instructor student, rosters now, that the speed at which the instructors are trained does not allow for the deepening of the knowledge and development of experience. What you're talking about with the pulling straps, the heels together piece, well, why would we do that? We would do that because we want to engage the glutes to bring more muscles into the picture for stability, for lumbar and pelvic stability. So that's why we would do that, but that's probably the least important cue. You're speaking to proximal to distal cueing. Okay, so instead of looking at somebody's heels in an exercise where we're doing direct back strengthening and working on postural strengthening, then that's not even a thing unless they've got everything else dialed in. So yes, abs, yes, where are they moving from? And and where are the corrections from? And so if you talk about proximal to distal cueing, and then you talk about if someone's uncomfortable laying on their abdomen, and it doesn't matter what the reason is, there's lots of reasons someone could be uncomfortable laying on their abdomen. They just are. They're not going to be able to execute the exercise and really get out of it what our intention is. If our intention is the direct back strengthening and postural, brilliant. Sit them up on a box. That's exactly what I would do. So we're like sister minds in this, but we know what the point of the exercise is. So when you talk about the point of the exercise and then the inclusion of a larger bodied person or someone who for any other reason isn't comfortable laying on their stomach, then I kind of circle back to the whole heels together thing. And there's lots of reasons why someone's heels won't fit together. So,
Yes.
Again, there we are. It's like, what are we teaching? Are we teaching some like generic movement and on some piece of equipment that's kind of a fitness thing, or are we teaching the point, which I feel like if we're teaching the point, we're back to our Pilates principles and we're back to cueing those things at that depth so that our students can understand what they're doing. Why are they doing this exercise?
Exactly. I think in the last podcast, we talked a lot about the kind of neutral spine cues. And even now, teachers are being still taught tabletop legs, neutral spine. And then they're sitting there going, but this kind of hurts my clients' backs. And people are complaining that their hip flexors are getting really tight. And I'm always like, I don't care how strong your fucking abs are. Tabletop is a position of strain in the hip flexors. So what do? You bring the knees in a little bit closer to the torso. It's okay.
Exactly right.
Okay to do that. And for healthy hips, especially, they need that range of motion.
That's right. Yes. And what you're speaking to again, and again, this is a ton of experience and a ton of continuing education that we've done to get to this point that a newer instructor who's been kind of processed through a fast food, style of instruction, just to sort of get this cert that can meet the insurance company's requirements and to give them the repertoire that they can use. And I think that it really depends on the instructor too. I mean, some instructors who have a ton of experience in a different modality may come in and may, because they've developed their eye elsewhere, may be quite good in that situation. But the tabletop thing, it's like, why do we do that? Well, we do that because the rectus femoris is a 2-joint muscle. And so that is primarily going to be working when someone's in tabletop, along with probably the tensor fasciae lata, which works as another superficial hip flexor. And where we really need to be strong there is our iliopsoas, which basically works like the supraspinatus of the shoulder to pull the femur bone, to pull the head of the femur in and slide it down so that the quads can do the heavy lifting. Now, how do we know that? We know that because we studied, we have decades of experience, and now that's the type of thing that we're teaching our students. And so, at this point, I am I'm seeing a little bit of a trend for some of the teachers who have been in the franchise type environment coming and saying, I really feel like my training wasn't complete because I didn't go through, well, not to mention the apparatus that didn't happen, and so that kind of reduces our ability as instructors to be able to move the person into a different environment to accomplish what we want to accomplish with them. If they say can't hold their legs in tabletop, where do you go if you have not been trap table trained?
Exactly. And that's another, it's a disservice in many ways. We don't just talk about the comprehensive Pilates training as being important because it's like expensive or makes us more money. We talk about that like there's a a teacher in my group now in my free Facebook group, and she is reformer and mat trained, but and she, has a client who could probably benefit from who doesn't like being on her stomach on the box. Fine. But they have spring walls, but she doesn't know how to use them because she hasn't been trained on the spring wall. So the studio owner is like, you can't send her over to the spring wall because you're not sure what to do. Now, for me, I just said, if you just take the arm springs and hook them up slightly higher than her shoulders when she's standing and just have her hold the handles and pull them down and back, she'll be fine. It's not going to hurt anybody. And that's a basic thing that you could do.
Right.
But the disservice then it's to the clients and to the teachers, because if you're teaching in a studio that has more equipment than just that reformer or whatever else it is, you should be able to take the clients through it. And it's not just extra. It's not just extra stuff. Joe Pilates did not invent stuff to just be extra or just be showy. He invented stuff because clients needed it.
Right. And it's part of a system. And so you really understand that when you go through the whole system, you see the connection, the similarities in the shapes, the movements, the muscle energy, and you begin to really understand. And I think it really takes at least 5 years to truly understand what it is we're doing teaching Pilates, honestly. I mean, it takes a lot of hours under the belt. But then if we kind of circle back to this idea of inclusion, the different areas that we can work, the different apparatus, it allows us to change the exercise and change the environment to be truly inclusive to whomever we're working with. So this is part of, in the issue that, continuing education and mentorship can help solve for newer instructors or even instructors who have been working for years, but really, only working on, the reformer or maybe only doing the mat. They can benefit from having that expanded environment and expanded repertoire and someone to sort of guide the person along with how is it that you can include all body shapes and sizes and fitness levels. And that I think it has part to do with mentorship, part to do with experience, because what I hear is if there is a teacher who does not have in their lived experience being in a body that needs a different environment or that may need a different variation of an exercise, how is that person supposed to know what to do?
Right, exactly. And if you haven't learned, basically learned the system so that you can then break it down into its component parts and then understand kind of how to work those in. I know, when I get on the reformer, as I have this big, deterioration in my cervical spine. I don't do rolling things anymore. I don't do leg overhead inversion things anymore. Sometimes they feel good when I'm doing them, between that and the hypermobility and the SI instability. Like short spine is just not something I need to do. I'm glad I was able to do it for the years I could do it, and it felt awesome. And I still teach it. It's not like I'm not anti-short spine. I'm anti-short spine for me.
Right.
But I know how to break that down. So if I'm in a class and they're like, okay, we're going to do short spine now, I will put my feet in the straps and I will just do the leg thing. I'll frog out. I'll bring my legs up. I'll bend them back down and I'll do it the other way. Fine.
Yeah.
But I know how to do that.
Yes, exactly. You know how to do that. And so we're talking about variations or what the word modification, I was told by someone I respect very much, Giovanna Heyman, who's author of Yoga Revolution, and he's the yoga for everyone person. He said that modifications can be an othering word. And so when we're talking about languaging and communication, I really think the most important thing that we can do, and as far as starting a conversation with our clients, is the simple question, how does that feel? And if someone asks me, well, where am I supposed to be feeling this? I will ask them, well, that's an interesting question. Where is it that you're feeling it? So that I'm not going to respond. And in my chapter in the book on this, I talk about the word should. And because I don't want to tell someone you should be feeling this in this spot, because if they're not feeling it in that spot, then they feel wrong or bad, or that the exercise isn't working for them, when perhaps we need to dig a little deeper as to what is going on. And, maybe they need more spring for feedback, or less spring, or different body, who knows what could be going on. But that starting that conversation, I feel, is really important. And then the other thing that it's not in the book, but I've been hearing it a lot lately, is this idea of advancing the client. And so this word advancement, and I feel like I'm actually working on that in my own languaging right now. I feel like that using that language, for me, I feel like it does not honor where I am right now, in a way that I'm less than because I'm not somewhere else yet, where I might be trying my best. This is my best. This is what I'm doing. And so, but I'm not advanced yet, and so.
But most clients are a mix, right? There's stuff that I can do, that I can still do with my neck, and all the other stuff that is considered advanced Pilates. I'm still good with tendon stretch. I can still knock out a good star. I'm good with snake and twist. There's a whole lot of the quote unquote advanced repertoire that I'm fine with. However, I'm not going to roll like a ball. Right.
Yeah.
And so there's certain things that you're never going to see me do at this point. And I find that with most of my clients. I'm now back in the studio a tiny bit. And I was with one of my clients, from pre-COVID. And she said to me, if I were to take a class, do you think I'm back to being a beginner? And I was like, absolutely not. I said, you could totally go into an intermediate to advanced class. You could modify where you needed to, and you would be just fine.
Yeah,
or, add variety where you need to,
or
change it where you need
variation.
to.
Yeah.
And you will be perfectly fine. So this idea that we have, and Joe Pilates never taught that way. In all of my discussions with anyone who worked with him, he just taught the body in front of him. And that's why sometimes we see him taking brand new clients into, back rowing, which we now think is like a high intermediate exercise, right? And kind of pushing their heads and guiding them through the exercise in a way that horrifies us. But he was like, something, these people use their upper bodies. They need to do this work. They're going to be fine. And then when and they were.
And because, if you have someone walk into your studio and they're an athlete, starting off, you have to meet someone where they are. And sometimes you almost have to drill backward. So I'll never forget the time I was teaching a couple. I was teaching a group, sort of a very basic introductory reformer class. And one of the men in there was huge, muscular, he literally threw tree trunks for his sport. He was one of these Scottish Games guys. Okay? So, and his wife is just a regular, lovely person. And so I had them doing footwork. And he looks at me and he's like, well, how do I make this harder? And I looked at him, and the first thought in my mind was, he does not need a leg press. He needs to connect his core to his leg strength, and put him on a yellow spring, and then stood there to catch his heels when he pressed out, and his eyes got big and he went, oh, and first time he'd really felt the core connection, I believe. And so this is the kind of thing that when we're teaching, it's like, what's our whole point? And when we're listening to someone, it's like, what are they actually saying? Like, how can we ask questions and drill down to what that person really needs to experience? So in the same vein, it's like, what is advanced? What does that mean? When I've not done martial arts myself, but I hear that when someone achieves their highest ranking in martial arts, like a black belt, for example, what do they get to do? They get to go back and they restart on the white belt material. So what is advanced? Is advanced executing a movement flawlessly, or is advanced really deepening our experience in our own bodies, understanding what we're accomplishing with the exercise, connecting it to our everyday life so that we take our Pilates and we walk out the door with it, and there it is. Could that possibly be advanced when Pilates becomes our life?
Right. Exactly. And when we can use it in that way, there's nothing like, for those of you who haven't been on a pedipole, I'm sorry, because you should try that at some point, but there's nothing like the first time you do chest expansion on the pedipole.
Can you see my pedipole in the corner?
I can.
Yeah.
Now, that first time when you're facing that pedipole and your hands are there, and the pull down is not so bad. The pull down is the easy piece. You get the springs down, you do your thing, maybe you turn your head. And then all of a sudden, your whole arm situation is getting pulled forward and way up overhead by these springs. And all your back wants to do is arch and allow you to lift, and getting that whole weight shift of pulling your abs in, realizing that you're almost doing a plank here in terms of, or, a long stretch in terms of what your abdominals are doing, and getting all that work together to lift those arms back up. Even if, I always even say on the reformer, where you have to be careful in chest expansion is when they're letting it go and bringing the arms forward. If they're going to fall, that's when they're going to fall.
That's exactly right. Because that's one of the things, this idea of eccentric muscle contraction that we teach, that we use for the control in Pilates, is different from just an inert weight stack or a dumbbell. It's so yes, that's exactly when they will lose it on the kneeling chest expansion. And so emphasizing, you're not done. It's not about going from point A to point B. It's really about the journey between those points and how well that is orchestrated and in the body. It's kind of like, circling back, that gives me an analogy to teacher training or continuing education. It's not about like just gaining a cert to be able to do something. It's really about the journey that we need to emphasize. I feel like in our teaching, it's important to have enough time with different bodies to be able to kind of percolate all of these principles and be able to then teach the body in front of you. And if they are different from you, especially the body in front of you is very different from your own body, this is an opportunity for a lot of learning and deepening of a practice.
Definitely. And then, speaking, even going back to knowing all the apparatus or having, that experience, like somebody asked me, well, you spent a solid decade working in a fully classical Gratz only studio. Now, prior to that, I mean, I've worked on every major manufacturer's equipment. I've taught, I used to rent in a Stott studio, Midtown, because it was very convenient for me. So I've learned to kind of adapt to these different pieces of equipment. And someone said to me, well, when you were teaching in a Gratz only studio, what did you do with kneeling sidearms? Right? Because, we know that that's a challenge, and it can be a challenge on a yellow spring, let alone a full-on Gratz spring. And I said, well, we could put it in second gear. We could, lengthen things and do that. I said, but I had baby armchairs. So if somebody couldn't do it there, could just march them on over to the baby armchair and have them do it right there in a more supported place with a little bit lighter spring. And they were like, wait, what? Armchair?
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, if you are really in a full studio, you're going to find those places. I'm like, there really are places where you can go within the system, within the classical system, and do that work. If you are in obviously a reformer only studio, you can't. And that's where having, a different variety of spring, as well as having risers where you can adjust where the spring's coming from, can make a big difference in how you're teaching. But again, in a group class, in an inclusive, situation like that, you're not necessarily going to be telling people to change their risers, right? Or explaining to people what they need to be doing there. And this I think is the big Pilates challenge for at least for the, future that I see, is getting teachers really comfortable with teaching in these kind of larger group environments. And frankly, I mean, they're still paying $40 to $45 for a reformer class.
Right.
Well, but they're trying
to
pack the bodies in so that they can pay their franchise fees, their rents, and their equipment leasing.
Yes. And I think that it's kind of a the sort of self-leveling kind of a field, because there are going to be people who are super happy with that format. And, you remember when curves came out? And people were asking me, oh, well, what do you think about curves? And I was like, well, I'd rather have a curves on every corner than a McDonald's, and that's a great entry point for people to learn about fitness and become a little bit more comfortable. And then there's going to be some people who are just content to stay there. There's going to be some people that will become hungry for more. Or it doesn't work for them for some reason, and they realize that they need individual attention, for example. So I think at some point we're just going to see these things kind of level out, and at least people are out there exercising. What I think I really am thinking about right now, as far as the working with groups, is kind of this idea in groups that the instructor sets the tone for the group. And so if someone is not able to execute an exercise as given, for whatever the reason is, being able to provide a different variation that will accomplish the same thing is important. And also addressing the negative self-talk that can come up in those situations, like clients who say, oh, I'm weak, or, oh, I can't do that. I know I'm injured, or I have this, that, or the other thing going on with me. I think as an instructor, I feel like it's really important. It's my responsibility to accept and listen and hear. And then perhaps when it's appropriate, if it is negative self-talk, to reframe that. So if someone says, I'm weak, I mean, my general thought here is to turn that around into you are getting stronger, so that the reframe that happens is positive. It's I'm weak doesn't take us anywhere, but I'm getting stronger now. Now I've got a goal. I've very subtly given them a goal, something to focus on. So I don't know what other people here in studio. Some of the ones that I've heard a lot is, oh, I'm just getting old. It's like, well, yeah, yep. And thank God.
Right? Every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Every single day
Yep.
we are.
Yep.
And there's an alternative to that, and it's not a great one.
Yeah.
I think it's just so important that we be our clients' cheerleaders in so many ways. And that's really something that I learned, working with very different kinds of people. When I was teaching in the Caribbean, I worked with, Emirate royalty. I worked with Hollywood folks, pre and post Oscars. I worked with all kinds of interesting and fun people. But believe me, no one wants to sit there being told, no, that's not right. No, that's not right. No, you need to do this. No, you need to do that. What people want to hear is, that looks really good. Let's try to make it a little bit better.
Yeah, or you can,
or just a general, can you get your sacrum down on the mat? Thanks. That's really good.
Yes, or focusing on the initiation of the movement, or moving a different body part, like get it going back to maybe chest expansion, sitting on the box as a direct back strengthening exercise. When people first start doing that, they really don't understand that it's, if you're cueing proximally to distally, you're really looking for strengthening the back. I mean, certainly the arms are there. If the arms aren't there, we're not doing the exercise. But then focusing then on it, I tend to do the same thing, Lynda. I'll say like, well, that looks great. Let's try it this way, something like that. And if someone is, I can see, missing the point because I haven't taught them the point yet of the exercise, then I'll say, well, that's great. Let's try initiating from maybe the bottom tips of your shoulder blades, and just see if you can bring those in a little bit towards your spine and feel the V of muscle, and, kind of bring them inside their body, and teach them what is the point of the exercise. In order to teach someone the point of the exercise, we have to understand that ourselves.
Exactly. Which actually very much brings us to your course, Dynamic Spine, which is a now moduled continuing education course. Also brings me back to Pilates Teacher Mastermind VIP, where we're also doing a lot of online learning, but a lot about the point of the exercises, what they are doing, how to break them down, how to really make them teachable. And just so you know, listeners, and these links will be in the show notes, but if you are already in any kind of training program or continuing education program, for example, Pilates Teacher Mastermind VIP, you get a 50% discount on the Dynamic Spine course. If you aren't, you can use the code Pilates Goddess and still get a 25% discount on the Dynamic Spine course. Just by knowing Gwen, just on the basis of going through her book, I can tell you right now that if you haven't learned the points of the exercises, if you're not really clear on spine positioning and what different spine positions look like. It's funny because I recorded a podcast this morning, somebody else's podcast, which will be out this week, but we talked about just like 10 basic spine positions. I was like flexion from the top, flexion from the bottom, flexion from both ends, hyperextend top, hyperextend bottom, hyperextend both, side bend, rotate. You got 10. That's it. Like the spine can only do so much. And when you understand it like that, it leads your brain to kind of break things down, I think, a little bit differently. Also makes it easier to find variations on positioning and equipment. So, you got somebody who's, say, flexion from the top intolerant, like our osteoporosis people. Right. And then you can easily figure out what you need to modify and where you need to modify it. I mean, it's just, these categorizations, and don't expect that like your teacher training program is necessarily going to have all of that for you. There's so much to cover in the first teacher training, and all teacher training programs expect continuing education. I'm sorry, I have been an ACE certified personal trainer for 24 years now or something. I just had to complete, my 20 hours of continuing education to recertify and get my renewal. ACE isn't like, so you've been doing this for 24 years, you don't have to take any more.
You don't know, because they want you to keep your knowledge safe. I've also have an ACE cert and an ASM cert. The same thing. It's like every 2 years to 3 years, there's sort of like this cycle of, I actually have it. I'm still old school with paper and pencil calendar. I actually have all my renewal dates written on a Post-it note in the front of my calendar, so I don't mess up and miss one. Right. But the thing is that when someone goes through a teacher training program, there's only so much of this fine tuning that can be accomplished, and B, when I have students come back and audit their teacher training modules, everybody always says, did you cover this the first time I took the course? And I'm like, well, yes, I did, because I have an outline and I make sure I cover everything. And it's not possible to retain everything. And so the repetition and the experience, and then also looking at topics like teaching, moving from different perspectives, like the idea of the purpose-driven instruction, like why are we doing this and what's our point? So important. And then also the understanding of what is the thing that I'm dealing with? What is this person's, issue? What is their body experiencing? So important as well. The reason I wrote this book is because for 2+ decades, someone would walk into my studio, and I got a reputation as the one who wasn't afraid of anybody's spine or joints, and like yourself, Lynda, right? And then every time someone came in, what did we do? We had to do the research. And so at some point, as a newer instructor, or even an instructor with tons of experience, having something that you can just go to, a resource that you can just go to and say, okay, that's right. That's how this situation is going to probably present in this person. And this is what I need to do, or this is the thing that needs to be strengthened. And so these are all my options.
Yes, because otherwise we are just left to the wild, wild west of Google. I'm telling you, I feel like we retained a lot more prior to this, because if I had a client come in with a spine thing, I was suddenly calling all the orthos that I knew, calling the physical therapists that I knew, going to the library and digging out some books and some journals. And now, everyone just goes on a Facebook group or just kind of, goes to WebMD and hopes for the best. So I think that these learning and teaching resources that are really geared toward Pilates teachers that add to the knowledge, that add to the experience. And, basically, if you're listening to this, I am encouraging you, no matter what background you come from in terms of your Pilates, no matter what your current studio or training situation may be saying about what's good continuing education and what isn't, that you just get out there and explore what you want to explore. If you want to make a Facebook profile and use a slightly different name and go into other people's groups and see what's going on, you should be doing that. Learn from, there are so many of us now. I mean, not a ton, but there are a lot of us now that are out there who have, who are in that second generation of teachers who have, 20, 30, 40 years under our belts, who have been there and done that, who have seen it all, who have worked with all kinds of clients, who have made all the mistakes ourselves.
Yep.
And finding, can really help guide you through.
And finding a teacher who resonates with your teaching style, I feel, is really important. So,
yes,
there's a lot of people saying similar things and offering things, and some, I think learning and continuing ed so valuable, and finding a teacher who speaks and delivers and interacts with you as a student, very important, because then you set up that environment of safety and learning to where you can really grow in that environment.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Gwen. As always, you are just a fount of knowledge, and I love talking to you.
I love talking to you too, Lynda. It's like we could just we could have coffee and do this all day. I'll have to come visit you. I swear, we just have such a good time because I have a passion for what we do and for making sure the quality, and the message is delivered well. And it's just so much fun. I love talking with you. Yeah.
Now you can pretty much find Gwen everywhere. She's on all the social medias. She has a great Amazon profile, Gwen Miller Pilates. She's also on the Balanced Body site. She is on the Osteo Pilates site, and all of her links, including the discount codes for those of you who want to take the Dynamic Spine course, as well as the link to pre-order her book, will be in the show notes.
Thank you, Lynda.
Thank you, Gwen. So everybody who's listening, as always, I love you. Thank you so much for listening and for sharing and for being here. As always, I would love it if you're loving the show, if you would go on to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Podchaser and leave a rating and a written review. The written reviews are actually important. They're important to how other people can find this show. So thanks for listening, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Music brought to you by Nerd Salad. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, especially if you liked it. And please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks.